I think everyone will get a little notice that it's being recorded. Okay, well, we'll get started so that we don't go too long this evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here for the February meeting. And I want to thank Tom Lang, who is here from Aurora Reimagined Coalition, and also some folks from SDOT who are in the leadership positions with that project. Marilyn Yim, Ed Pothurst, David Bergerser, I believe, is here or will be soon. Let's see, Hannah Ferris, and I don't know if Krista Dumpies is here, but she may or may not be. So thank you all for being here. And when we get to the question and answer sessions, they may have some answers too. So with that, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us about Aurora Avenue Reimagined.
Awesome. Thanks, Paula. And thank you, everyone, for inviting us to speak. We at the Aurora Reimagined Coalition are really excited always to talk about Aurora, which is, I think, for some people a surprise because Aurora is not something we like to talk about often. I'm going to share my screen here and try to also pull up my presenter view. 1 second. Okay. Let me know if it's coming through clearly and you can see that first slide. So my name is Tom Lang. I'm one of the leaders in the Aurora Reimagined Coalition. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are and also the project that's happening. There's a number of projects happening along Aurora. But just for some context, you may have heard about the Aurora Reimagined Coalition. We've been in the Seattle Times, King 5 News, Qacc, and The Urbanist. You might have seen this logo, Got 99 Problems, around the city. We had a number of stickers. We handed them out to people, and folks have been putting them up on signs and in other places that the community can see. So if you have seen it, you know that's also us. It's kind of our tagline, Got 99 Problems. Let me... Why can I not see? Is that the last slide? That's the problem. I was at the very last slide and not the first slide. Okay, sorry for that. So for tonight, what I was hoping to talk about with all of you is a brief overview of who we are, what we're doing, and then what's happening with Aurora. Who's doing what? When are they going to do it? And luckily, we're also joined by many of the project team leaders at SDOT, which is great. They're all very knowledgeable, capable, and helpful people. So I'm sure if there's any specific questions about the project, they'd be happy to answer those. I'm here more to talk about the corridor as a whole, and also what it looks like from an advocacy perspective, not necessarily the project itself, what's going to be poured when and where, but more what can we expect as a community up and down the Aurora corridor. There's a number of projects happening, so I'll briefly touch on those and then talk about specifically the Queen Anne's section of Aurora and how all of you can get involved. Okay, so the Aurora Reimagined Coalition, all volunteer, all grassroots organization. We formed very recently, early 2021. A number of us came together. A lot of us are from neighborhood greenways organizations. You may have heard of Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. There's a Queen Anne Greenways. There's a number of greenways groups in the Greenwood, Bitter Lake, Howler Lake, Green Lake, and the Finney Ballard groups that are all very interested in an improved Aurora because it touches on so many different neighborhoods, including those just mentioned. And also it really influences a lot of how people move through the city. It's a dividing line for some neighborhoods. In other neighborhoods, it's, for lack of a better place, the heart of the neighborhood. I'm thinking of where I live, actually, on 100th Street in the Licton Springs, Aurora, Licton Urban Village area. Aurora is the heart of our neighborhood, for better or worse, and oftentimes it's for the worse. So the neighborhoods that the corridor touches really are interested in improving it. So we formed a coalition, brought in a lot of community groups, some businesses that are interested in seeing it improved, and just a lot of really passionate individuals. Like I said, all volunteers, all grassroots, no one's getting paid for it. We have no budget. We're not incorporated as a 501c3 or even as a nonprofit in the state of Washington. We're really very grassroots right now and trying to keep it like that, because we think that the most effective thing we can do is just gather people together and not try to make it too formal of an endeavor, but instead make it organic as much as possible. Our vision is to create an Aurora Avenue North that puts people first. And this, it really means people who are walking, who are rolling either in a stroller or a wheelchair, people who are rolling on a bike, on a scooter, people who take transit, and also people who drive. Everyone moves up and down the corridor in some way. We want to make sure that people are put first and not anything else. We want a Aurora corridor that supports thriving businesses, and also one that fosters diverse communities. We already have very diverse communities up and down the corridor. We want to maintain that and improve it in the future. And finally, we are recognizing that there's impacts from climate change, and urban heat island effect is a big issue up and down the corridor. Flooding will become more of an issue. So there's a lot of things that we want to see change about the roadway that can mitigate some of these challenges in the future. Our purpose, our strategy, so to speak, is to bring together the community, public officials, agencies, stakeholders, everyone who has a stake in the Aurora corridor. We want to bring them together to catalyze transformational change. I'm going to talk about transformational change in just a moment. I probably don't need to say this. If any of you have lived in Seattle for a period of time, you are familiar with Aurora. I grew up in the area, so it's always been kind of the way it is now to me in my head. But I recently moved to the neighborhood and decided it doesn't have to be this way. We can change it, and it needs to be changed immediately because it is growing quickly. There's over 1,000 new homes under construction in the area. This is multi-story apartment buildings, lots and lots of townhouses up and down the corridor. And there's more growth coming to the urban villages like Bitter Lake and Broadview, the Aurora Licton Urban Village, Fremont. Those places are expected to grow extraordinarily in the next few years. So we really need to make a safe place for the people who live there to move around their neighborhood. The E line is the busiest bus line in the entire state. So we really want to make sure that it is maintained and improved as much as possible. And also there's schools, there's daycares. A lot of people don't think about some of the schools that are really just a block off of Aurora, 2 blocks maybe. There's a lot of students, hundreds of students that cross the highway every day. So we need to make those crossings safer and more pleasant for students and families. So the Aurora project is, as you can see here on the screen, this is what the SDOT folks here tonight can talk a lot more in detail about. It's broken up into 5 segments. It's a long stretch of highway, and it is a big, big project. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we at the Aurora Reimagine Coalition are viewing the project, some of the details that we think are really important, and also, let me click that. Also bring in the fact that Metro is also a big part of this project, working to improve station access, bus stop access, lane exclusivity, so bus only lanes. They're looking at speed and reliability for the E line, and lighting improvements around bus stops. So a lot of things that can make the E line safer and faster, more reliable for people up and down the corridor. And I think this is one of the things that can really apply to the Queen Anne segment in particular. And finally, the other big kind of wrinkle, I guess, in this project is that Aurora is State Route 99. It's a state highway. So the Washington State Department of Transportation is very involved. They actually are in charge of the project. The money that's funding this project, this study, is from the Washington State Department of Transportation, as well as SDOT. So together they're putting together this project. SDOT's the lead, but WashDOT is also heavily involved and has to be because it is a state highway. So any improvements that happen to the highway, they'll need to sign off on. So it gets really complicated in that respect. And then to make it even more complicated, Seattle Public Utilities is also looking at improving a lot of drainage issues up and down the highway in the corridor, so a block or 2 off of the highway. And they're looking at what happens during the construction period of this project, because they would like to jump in there and also, fix up some pipes at the same time. And finally, Seattle City Light, similar to Seattle Public Utilities, is also interested in jumping in there when the streets are ripped up and doing a little bit of work as well. So a lot of people are paying attention to this project. A lot of different agencies are interested in what's going to come out of the study period and what actually ends up happening. So that whole project for the corridor is $2.5 million. But there's also, you may have heard, a $50 million fund for one segment of the highway. And this is the Aurora-Licton Urban Village segment of the highway from 90th to 105th. This was put into the transportation budget last year at the state legislature. And it's going to fund a number of things. We aren't sure yet. There's a time limit when the funding has to be spent, a couple other requirements, but the idea is that we focus $50 million into this one neighborhood as a demonstration project of what can be done up and down the corridor in different neighborhoods. So $50 million you may have heard of for Aurora is specifically for the Aurora-Licton Urban Village section of Aurora. The $2 million study is the entire corridor. And this is where things get really complicated. And we'd like to always share as many details as we can to get people clear about what's happening. But what we are at the Aurora Reimagine Coalition, what we're focused on advocating for in this $50 million demonstration project is really 5 main themes. We want to make sure that all sidewalks and crosswalks are accessible for everyone, safe, reliable, accessible sidewalks and crosswalks. We want to make sure that people can bike up and down the corridor, whether it's on the highway or on an adjacent street. We want to make sure there's an all ages and abilities bike route, north and south. We want to make sure transit is reliable, safe, dependable. And we want to make sure that communities are not divided by the highway, especially if you look at Fremont and of course in Queen Anne, as you're aware, it really does divide the neighborhood. We want to make sure that we can connect the neighborhoods, reconnect them, and produce a sense of belongingness in the corridor itself. And of course, again, the resiliency in a changing climate, there's a lot of things that can be done to mitigate the effects of climate change in the future. So a lot of different things that could come out of this $50 million demonstration project, but the planning for that won't start until after the corridor, the entire highway study of $2 million is complete. When we're talking about transformational change, the focus of the Aurora Reimagine Coalition, we're hoping for something similar to this. This is a mock-up that one of our coalition members made of an intersection in the Aurora-Licton Urban Village area, creating what we call a street end plaza. This is a simple idea, wouldn't cost much money, but we think it could be transformational in how people approach the highway. You don't have to necessarily take away lanes of travel. You can still increase reliability for transit. You can put in more crosswalks and pleasant places for people to congregate, more street trees. There's a lot of things we can do to fundamentally change the highway. But as soon as people hear change, they get nervous because change is difficult and strange. We want people to think of the change as a positive, and it's all about how we change it. So we're thinking big, and we encourage all the community members we meet to also think big, to think transformational, and to not be afraid of the change, because the change is coming. As I mentioned, thousands and more people are coming to the city every month, and we're going to see a lot of them on the Aurora corridor. So more people means fundamental change no matter what, more buildings, things like that. We want to embrace the change and make sure it's a positive change for everyone. A couple other projects that are happening that are of interest, I think, if you are really interested in the kind of development of the corridor and the city as a whole. In the Licton Springs area, there's a urban village plan coming soon through the Office of Planning and Community Development. There's also a home zone project underway now in the Aurora-Licton Urban Village area. They just completed some sidewalk upgrades in the Licton Springs area, about 80th Street North. So a lot of stuff is happening in that neighborhood in particular. And I mention all this because Seattle Public Utilities, I said before, is very interested in what's happening here. There's also been the Parks Department interested in what was just completed, the Green Lake Outer Loop, you may have heard of. There's a lot of different projects and departments that are already invested in looking at Aurora. And we think that this is a very clear sign that change is coming, and we need to get in front of it and to harness all that attention and focus and budget money and make sure that it goes to the right places and encourages other departments to also start focusing on the corridor and improving it from start to finish, not just a little piece here or a little piece there. An urban village plan would be great, but if it's done in a silo without any other departments like public health, public safety, or transportation, then it doesn't really do a whole lot. We need to make sure that everyone's coordinated and working together. So that's the other big part of the Aurora Reimagined Coalition's task, is to make sure that everyone at the city level and even the state, county level, everyone is looking at Aurora holistically and not just doing their own job in a silo. Speaking of the outer loop, you may have heard that this is the recently completed complete loop around Green Lake. We are really excited about this project. We see it as the first step in reimagining Aurora. You can see here a before and after picture of one spot along the western side of Green Lake. They took an unused lane of Aurora and converted it into a shared use path. We think it's great. It just recently was nominated as one of the top 10 best new bike routes in the country. I think that's the term they use. So it's a pretty big deal, a transformational change for sure for that section of Aurora. We want to see this type of transformational change continue up and down, north and south from Green Lake. Moving back quickly to the Aurora Avenue project itself, this $2.5 million study of the entire stretch of the highway from the tunnel down in South Lake Union all the way to 145th Street to the border with Shoreline is a big task. And to try to think about the entire highway all at once is very difficult. There's a lot of different neighborhoods that have very different needs and demands than other neighborhoods. So you can see here the way that SDOT's broken up by segments. We also are doing something similar. We're looking at each neighborhood in particular and thinking what specifically in this neighborhood would be most needed. And that is framing our vision, which I'll talk about in just a minute. What do we envision for Aurora, and in particular, what do we envision for the Queen Anne section of Aurora? But the way SDOT's project is laid out, they're going to develop a vision for the entire corridor that kind of looks at how they see traffic flowing, people on bikes, pedestrians, how does everyone move up and down and across the corridor as a whole and segment by segment. And then also in that study, which should be done, I think, late next year, perhaps 2025, in that study, they also are able to bring to 90% design 3 spot improvements. And these are small projects similar to the outer loop that could have been one of the spot improvements, but it was done before this project started. But 3 other projects that they can get up to 90% design, which means it won't actually be done unless more funding comes through in the future. But still, it's a start and a really big start. So we're excited about these spot improvements. To give you an idea of some things that the Aurora Reimagined Coalition is going to advocate for in each of these neighborhoods where we think some spot improvements could be useful, as examples, here in Fremont, 41st Street, if you drive north from Queen Anne, the first thing you see over the highway is the 41st Street pedestrian bridge. It's one of the oldest pedestrian bridges on Aurora. There's pictures of it from back in, I think, 1920, 1921 or something. So it's been there for a long time and it needs to be seismically retrofitted. And we would like to see, we don't know if the bridge will stay or if it'll go, what the cost might end up being to fix it or just to tear it down completely. But we think what would be better than a non-accessible bridge is an at-grade crossing that knits back together the neighborhood. Because right now, if you are a student at BF Day School, which is just off the picture to the left here, you can't cross over to Stone Avenue and get anything you might need, grocery store, neighbors, friends, and vice versa. It's really hard for that side of Fremont to go to the other side. So what we want to see is a reconnected grid with an at-grade crossing. Another spot improvement that's desperately needed up in the Bitter Lake neighborhood. You can see here on the left, this is about 133rd Street. There's an open ditch still. We don't have sidewalks in this stretch of the highway. On the west side of Aurora, it's just a shoulder of free for all, and it's really dangerous. That's why you can see here, that was us on a walk. We had to put vests on to stay safe. an open ditch is just unacceptable, I think, in an urban environment like this in Seattle. So we want to see some improvements done in the Bitter Lake neighborhood for sure, more sidewalks, maybe a more safe and accessible crossing at 130th Street. There's a lot of things that could happen in Bitter Lake, to be honest. And then our vision for Queen Anne, in particular, Queen Anne, similar to the Fremont neighborhood, is divided by Aurora. So what we really want to see is the street grid reconnected here in Queen Anne. And what you see on your screen here, you may recognize, is the intersection at Ray Street. And we're thinking at-grade crossing rather than having to go down and around with the tunnel and the road that goes around and back up around Canlis. If there was an at-grade crossing at Ray Street, it would allow people to walk or bike safely and easily over to Canlis and then on to Thomas Wales Park. You could go down to Lake Union from there. People driving also would be able to turn easily on and off from 99, which would reduce congestion and all those fender benders that happen at that 5-way stop just a little bit to the west of this picture. So we would love to see things like this, not only at Ray Street, but we're thinking Aloha would be a good location. Gaylor is a critical location. Right now, the bridge that's there is not accessible because that lift just doesn't work. I don't think it's ever worked really. And I don't think it has plans to work in the future. So there's a lot of things that could be fixed in the Queen Anne neighborhood, but fundamentally the idea is let's reconnect the neighborhood and not make Aurora a dividing line in the future like it has been in the past.
Tom,
So,
question?
oh yeah, I am just now finished up, but I can get to these get involved points later. Sure.
It's specifically on what you just said. So about kind of implementing these different kind of crosswalks to cross Aurora, or ways to kind of bridge the neighborhoods. How do you, kind of two questions. First is, how do you kind of involve neighbors that might have kind of property right at that intersection? I do, so that's why I kind of question. And then second, you mentioned earlier about public safety and like kind of looping in all of the, not just transportation, but like thinking about really cross-functionally, like what are the other kind of groups that need to be involved here? I think that, that would be, as like having lived like one block off Aurora down on Aloha for like 2 years, I don't live there anymore, but we have tenants there. It's kind of a problem area. Like we've seen more and more kind of traffic of things you might not really would like. And so how do you like plan to, like when we're thinking about, oh, this would be so great from a transportation and like an accessibility perspective, but like balancing kind of the public safety element as well, and like what the impact could be, or what do those intersections look like today, and how might they be kind of impacted by these types of changes?
Yeah, those are great questions. The first question for nearby property owners, this again is just a vision. We are
I know
an
it's
advocacy group. We
yeah.
don't know what will end up happening, and even if it were to be adopted, exactly what you see on the screen, we wouldn't have any say in it, or we wouldn't have any authority. So it really comes down to what SDOT decides to do with any improvements up and down the corridor. What we're doing as an advocacy group is trying to gather momentum from the community side to put pressure on elected officials at the city, at the county, at the state level to fund the improvements that SDOT does come up with, and also throughout the entire process to make sure that SDOT's preferred designs are what the community wants to see, that it results in a safer, more accessible, and healthier corridor in the future. To your second point, really great point, and we at the Aurora Reimagined Coalition are starting to talk more about public safety, land use, and a lot more of the ecological parts of the corridor. Right now, we talk more about transportation because this is where the funding is. This is where the focus is right now with this redesign of the highway. But there's a lot of other things that are coming down the pipeline, and also a lot of issues that just need to be addressed sooner rather than later. So we're trying to gather momentum and focus attention on all of these as a whole. And public safety, of course, is one of them. Anyone who's traveled north of 85th Street really has seen there's also a lot of sex trafficking along Aurora, drug use, homeless encampments, a lot of things that you see across the city, but they're really exacerbated on Aurora itself. We are not blind to this, and we're not trying to be ignorant of it, but we are cautious to wade into a topic that to be honest, us and the people who are in the coalition now don't have a lot of expertise in it, but we
Right.
do know that we have to talk about this and we have to focus attention not only on transportation, but other issues as well. Public
Right.
safety is one of them for sure.
And if I might oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to talk over you, Tom. If I might jump in just really quickly, later on in the meeting, we're going to actually have a discussion about this, because one of the things that I think we will do as a community in Queen Anne is to look at the multidisciplinary factions of it, you know, the transportation aspect, land use, public safety, and all of that, and bring together our own group then too that can work with Aurora Reimagined, with SDOT, with all the other city organizations and state that will be involved in the project. So you're just sort of ahead of the game, Nicole, as always.
No, that's helpful. Thanks. And yeah, I mean, there's up in that you mentioned it, but we go up to like that Home Depot and like the Lowe's up north a fair amount, and like they're young girls, and it's really sad. So okay,
Yeah.
this is super helpful. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Continue with your
No, that's exactly right. We need to get all the questions out there. I completely agree with you. I think it's vitally important that we talk about all the issues at once, but the reality is that the focus right now is on transportation. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on getting these first steps of the transportation study right, so that we can then put more energy and focus on these other issues and have them all work together. Because we do believe at the Aurora Reimagined Coalition that an improved streetscape will lead to improved public safety. Land use, same thing. They're all interconnected. It's all related, and we can't do one without thinking about the others. So yeah, lots more to come, and we definitely want more input and thoughts from folks up and down the corridor, and definitely in Queen Anne, about all these issues, not just transportation. So the last bit I'll talk about here, we love it if people join the coalition. You can email aurorareimaginedcoalition@gmail.com if you want to find out more about what that means, what it means to be part of the coalition, what are the different types of joining the coalition. To be honest, there's a lot of people who are in the coalition, but they're watching and observing, and they get involved every now and then. There's about 12 of us in the steering committee who really lead the efforts of the coalition day in, day out. And there's also a Google group where folks kind of just chat more about different things that are related to Aurora without having to spam like our entire email list of 600. So there's a couple ways to get more involved. We also are planning to do a business outreach day. This will be a number of days because each neighborhood will have their own day, but we're doing a volunteer orientation on March 16th. And we'd love to get more people, especially in the Queen Anne neighborhood, to come out and help us canvass businesses, just knock on doors and say, hi, how are you? Do you want to talk about Aurora? Because we love to talk about Aurora, and any business that's on or near Aurora would also like to talk about it, but they often find that they don't have a good outlet. So we want to be there to share with them what we're thinking and also hear their concerns. If you are interested in that sort of thing, we'd love to hear from you. And finally, we have grown so quickly in the last 2 years, and it's really because neighbors are just talking to each other about this. They mention, oh, by the way, did you hear about this Aurora stuff? And that's the best thing you can do if you really want to help out, is just let everyone tell them, things are changing, things are happening. We should, stay on top of this and be involved. So please tell your neighbors, reach out if you have any questions or comments. We are collecting stories about Aurora. So if you have a perspective that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. And finally, I'm going to be here to answer questions. I know SDOT folks are on the line too, so they could probably share a little bit about their perspective of the project, which is, of course, very much warranted. We are just representing much more the grassroots perspective. So we aren't talking about the details and the departmental things. We're more focused on the big picture advocacy. But anyhow, thank you all for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. We appreciate it. If there's not an objection, what I would like to do, because we do have another segment on the agenda tonight, to come back and have a discussion about Aurora Reimagined, how we can get involved, what's coming up with SDOT, because there are some community meetings that'll be coming up about design, and will we have an opportunity to provide our input. So if SDOT folks can stick around for a few minutes, for a little while, I should say, we do have Councilmember Lewis waiting in the wings, and I would like to respect his time a little bit too. So if we could go ahead and let him give us an update on what's happening in City Council, that would be great. And then we can circle back to this particular discussion and take more time with it. So Councilmember Lewis, go right ahead. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Paula, thank you. It was good to be here to take advantage of the opportunity to hear that 99 presentation. And I'm very excited about what those partnerships foretell for the future of that corridor, and especially the portions that overlap with District 7. So thank you all for your presentation. And if I can ever be helpful, reach out to me. It'd be great to learn more and figure out how our office can plug in on that. So as Paula just stated, Andrew Lewis, council member for District 7, which includes the neighborhood of Queen Anne. So there's a lot going on now that the year is fully in swing, and here we are in February. And I'm happy to give a bit of an overview of some of my office's immediate priorities and some of the things we can expect to be a big part of the council and the city's work plan over the course of 2023. As well as queue up some areas that could be of particular collaboration between my office and the community council. As usual, I mean, I'll recognize that my district director, Parker Dawson, is in the meeting this evening, and that is a presence that we are going to continue, and Parker will continue to be here as a conduit between the office, and I will try to come by at least on a quarterly basis to give these updates, and have been really proud of our ability to maintain that continuity of that communication over the course of the past 3 years, and hope to continue to do that into the future. So the biggest priority that the council and the mayor have shared and are facing is post-COVID economic revitalization and public safety, and particularly the areas where those two issues intersect. The Queen Anne neighborhood in particular has seen a rash of residential and commercial burglaries over the course of the past several months, which is something that has dominated a lot of the time of my office in working with the West Precinct to see how that can be addressed. Paula has helped organize a gathering, I believe on Zoom, for later this month, that is solely going to address that. And I don't know how broad members of the public are invited to that, but of course, as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to make time to talk about these issues with any group that is interested. But we will be giving some special dedicated time to Queen Anne Avenue businesses to discuss the particular challenges around commercial burglary in that area towards the end of this month. More broadly on public safety, there's a lot of things that are percolating in 2023. And I was hoping that by now I would be in a position to release a report that I think is going to come out from my office next week. Was going to come out this week. It's not quite done. Probably going to come out next week, summarizing 2023 public safety programming investments that the council has made in our last biennial budget, which we approved last fall. There hasn't really been a comprehensive summary of what those things are, and this has been a common area of feedback from constituents who want to know what are the things the city is doing to address the public safety challenges we're facing. And there's quite a few things that we passed in 2022 that'll be implemented in 2023. And I could go over some of those things now, but we are going to publish them in a very concise and readable report that should be a good resource, particularly for community councils to disseminate to their constituencies or BIAs, chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs, as a target audience for those things. And they're really items that show the new spirit of collaboration between the Harrell administration and the council, and really getting a lot of things done that are going to have implications for Queen Anne. One of those things is a dramatically expanded park ranger program, which Queen Anne is going to benefit from. We're expanding our park rangers from 2 to 28. So there's going to be more presence in our parks from city employees to activate those spaces and keep eyes on those spaces. we are going to have an alternative response pilot, which has been a long time coming, to provide alternative low acuity response for things that officers have historically been charged with doing but don't need to do, to free up officer time to respond to things only officers can respond to. And that response is currently being scoped to hire personnel and implement it, but it's fully funded and a joint collaboration between the council and the mayor's office. There are other things we're aspiring to do this year in the alternative response scheme of things, and also in increasing the efficacy of our existing police resource, for the police to be prioritizing their time on things that we really need them to do, including burglary investigation and prevention, and of course, preventing and investigating violent crime in our community. So those are going to be ongoing areas of shared concern between the mayor's office and the council. We also recently, in collaboration with the county council, put a measure on the ballot that we'll be talking a lot more about over the next several months. And I am talking with Tyler Crone and Paula about potentially doing some kind of community forum to let people know about this measure, but a measure that'll be on a special election ballot in April. So not the current election regarding the Social Housing Authority, but a special election in April 25th is going to be the date, for a crisis care center measure. This is a proposal that is responsive to a problem that's very familiar to people on Queen Anne, of us not really having places in our community that are on demand for people who are in some kind of behavioral health crisis to be transported to, for stabilization, for care, and for them to not be, in the middle of the street as a threat to themselves or others, but to get some kind of assistance. This crisis care center legislation will create 5 centers around the county. It's based on a system in Maricopa County in Arizona, where everyone is 20 minutes or less away from a walk-in, on-demand, free at the point of entry crisis care center. It's a really robust system that they have in Maricopa County, of all places. And this will help us resolve the issue that we've been experiencing as a county, really since the beginning of the pandemic to now, where we have had a massive retrenchment in our behavioral health sector that has had a really detrimental impact on the community. We have 1/3 fewer behavioral mental health beds than we had in 2018. So the system has shrunk by 1/3 at a time when it's really needed to be expanding. So this measure is going to be a property tax, countywide property tax levy. It's going to be 14.5 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. It's going to be an average annual cost of about $120 for the average King County homeowner. But it is a very, very essential public safety resource, and something that Dow Constantine and Gurmai Zahalai at the county have proposed, and that was unanimously recommended at the Regional Policy Committee, which is the body of the county, the city, and the suburban cities of King County, to be sent to the ballot, given the importance and the need for this service. So again, I'm working with Paul and Tyler to try to find a time fairly close to maybe when the ballots are going out. So maybe like in late March or early April, so that the community could have an opportunity to hear more about this. People will be getting a weird ballot in the middle of April and probably have questions, and it might be a unique opportunity for us to come together and talk about this in some detail and what the implications might be for the Queen Anne neighborhood. So those are some of the public safety items that we're working on. I'll briefly touch on some of the areas, some of the other areas of District 7 that aren't necessarily Queen Anne, but I know have strong implications, and that people in Queen Anne are very concerned about. So in particular, downtown recovery. I think that 2023 is going to be a really, really interesting year for downtown recovery. The Herald administration feels very, very strongly about a robust and dynamic recovery in the downtown neighborhood in a way that isn't focused on just a reversion to the pre-COVID status quo of downtown, but that is transformative in nature in diversifying the uses, the purposes, and the role of downtown to reflect the post-COVID reality of how downtowns around the country, indeed around the world, are evolving to meet the natural reordering that work from home has kind of dealt to office work, and the lower intensity of office work is part of the downtown economy. So things like the conversion of office space into housing, things like a focus on entertainment and livability and neighborhood amenities, those are going to be much more prominent in our downtown planning, and there will be a much swifter move toward making those kinds of improvements, and particularly in following up on our action taken in the fall to adopt the Downtown Seattle Association's Third Avenue vision as the city's policy for that particular corridor, which has big implications for the people of Queen Anne, given that if you're going downtown from Queen Anne, you're almost certainly going to be on Third Avenue before you're anywhere else, and Third Avenue continues to be a problematic thoroughfare in that neighborhood. So those are going to be things that, particularly in the first half of the year, there's going to be a lot of activity around queuing up the next steps to move forward. Finally, what I'll finish on is we do have tentative timelines for the Queen Anne Community Center, the major renovation for the Queen Anne Community Center. Those timelines have been published online. The Parks Department is hoping to have design finished by 2025 and ground broken by late 2025 or early 2026. That is going to follow on several years, starting now and culminating sometime in 2025 of community input in exactly what the scope and scale and nature of that major renovation is going to entail. So as we go forward this year, I'm hoping to make sure the Queen Anne Community Council is integrated into this process with parks to really, from the ground up, have a big role and a big vision in helping shape what the Queen Anne Community Center is going to look like on the other end of this over $20 million major renovation that is going to be receiving. So, that's still in early days as yet. But it's something we are going to keep everyone here informed on. I'm very, very grateful for the advocacy of everybody here throughout the Metropolitan Park District process to make sure that that major capital investment was funded. I don't think it would have been unless the community had been very strong in its advocacy. So those are just a couple of highlights, and I'm happy, I know I certainly didn't cover everything, and there's probably things people have follow-up questions on or completely different topics I didn't cover in these initial remarks. So I'm happy to hand it back to Paula, and if there's additional questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. It's nice to hear some positive news for a change, and after so many years of things being in a not great situation. So thank you very much for the hard work you've done. Does anyone have questions for Councilmember Lewis? And Parker, if you don't mind unmuting your video and just waving your hand so that people recognize your face when they see you. Thank you. There he is, the man of the hour. So thank you. Anyway, does anyone have a question for Councilmember Lewis? We will make sure that Tyler and I had already communicated a little bit about the special levy that's coming up in April, and we'll definitely work on getting that program together and getting that information out to the community. So that'll be an important thing. And then also we will certainly be looking for some updates on the community center as that progresses. Don.
Yeah, hi, Andrew. Again, thank you for getting that money through into the Parks District for the community center. Really, that was That was quite an achievement. It really was. Here's my question. It was on the retrofit of office buildings into possible housing. And I'm just wondering how, from what I understand, and having worked in office buildings, in the not and the office portions, but actually, in the construction, and that, and what I've read also is that it's very difficult. I mean, extremely and possibly really expensive to convert from office to housing. So I was just wondering, and only because I'm not stating facts on this, just what I've understand is how is the city council and the mayor's office following up on sort of vetting this idea, whether it's even worth pursuing if the developers are even interested in trying something like this.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Don. And as you'll know, as a contractor, the term tends to be in the industry adaptive reuse to convert something from kind of one use to another if that's what the market is has demand for. And you're right, like a lot of office space downtown is not eligible at all for a conversion. Like a lot of the prominent buildings that we identify as office towers really can't be converted to any other purpose in any practical way. But there are a lot of buildings of a certain vintage that from talking to property managers downtown would be eligible candidates for some kind of adaptive reuse, depending on in some cases, there's buildings that were housing and adaptively converted into offices. In the downtown core, for example. So some of it could be a reversion back, but they tend to be those buildings of a generation that are pre 1990. One example I can use for people who are familiar with downtown buildings is the Qacc building, which is located at University and 4th, and it's currently a residential building, but used to be an office building. That's the kind of structure that typically this can work for. That's probably like a 10-story kind of masonry building and was probably built, fairly early on in the metropolitan tract when the university sold some property off to build some things down there. So, it's difficult because typically it can be more economical just to knock the office building down and build a new housing building on top of it. But there's some buildings where it might make sense to do adaptive reuse. So, to really get to the crux of your question, we're looking at, what kind of incentives would be appropriate to make it pencil for people. Portland is doing a lot of this, and so is New York City. And in both of those cases, it seems like it mostly comes at the expense of inclusionary zoning laws. Like you don't have to do the, I guess for us, it would basically be like an MHA exemption. Like you don't have to pay MHA if you do an adaptive reuse. So, I'm not endorsing any particular thing right now, but, that's what some cities are doing. In Canada, where they don't have gift of public funds rules, they're just directly subsidizing it. Like Calgary is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on office to housing conversions. It's not impossible that we could do that, but then they would have to be affordable because we can only, we only spend money on affordable housing. So it would have to, be like Office of Housing eligible. And I don't know what Office of Housing's opinion is on investing in adaptive reuse versus new build or acquisition. So, we're really early. Your questions are exactly the right ones. We don't completely know yet exactly how that's going to work, but we definitely need a bigger density of people living downtown. Office work is probably only going to come back to about half of what it was pre-COVID, and we have to replace those people somehow, and it should be with residents. Tourists are seasonal and everything else, so residents are probably the best way to increase the density of activity and the aggregate demand and activation in the neighborhood.
Good question. Sharon, do you have a question? Thank you.
Andrew, wanted to thank you so much for getting money in the budget for dog off leash areas. I know you get tired of hearing about this, but you were great also in admonishing the park department to re-examine their standards for establishing an off leash area and for possibly loosening some of the standards. You even mentioned Queen Anne as a community that needs one, and we haven't heard anything. It's been months. I'd like to know what follow-up you've had and what you've heard, and if maybe you could spur this process along a little bit. We've been waiting about 23 years now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing that might be helpful, because we're in a leadership transition at Parks right now, and the new superintendent, I think, is pretty impressive, AP Diaz, and I'm happy to try to produce him to come here to answer questions like that. I think he should do the rounds of some community councils, and I'm happy to try to get him here. The Parks has money in its capital budget to do additional dog runs off leash areas. And I think there's several potential spots in Queen Anne that would be appropriate if Parks would loosen their criteria, as which you're alluding to, a discussion we had with them. So, we don't have any immediate update on what the movement is for that, but there is still money that is uncommitted that could go to a Queen Anne location. But the first step would probably be getting Parks to do a site assessment and getting them to be lenient on how dogmatic they would be. Dogmatic, not to, no pun intended, but how dogmatic they would be on the suitability of the site. So we're going to continue to work on it, and there's resources, and it's sort of an implementation thing. And that's the only update I have. But a good start might be getting AP Diaz here just generally to get to know people. And I think he's going to be quite good. We're probably going to confirm him late winter, early spring, but he's doing the rounds and totally available. So I can work on producing him for a future meeting.
Great. How much longer will you be Parks chair?
Well, right now, indefinitely. Probably as long as I want to. No one's sticking around on the city council, so I'm not here in my candidate capacity. I'm here in my official capacity, so I can't get into that more broadly. But there's no one right now who's hankering to take it from me. So.
Thanks very much. And we'll definitely work with your office to get AP here, because I think that would be really helpful. It'd be helpful for him to hear from us as well as to hear from him too about his vision. So thank you very much. Anything else for the council member, or shall we let him get on with other items on his agenda for the night? So thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate the updates. And again, thanks for the successes that you helped foment in 2022, and we'll look forward to seeing those put into place in the next several years. So thank you.
Yeah, more to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. So normally we would flip back and do our short business meeting right now, but I think we'll just wait until the very end to do that. And we will come back to our Aurora Avenue discussion for a while and not keep our SDOT folks here all night. And Tom Lang, Tom, I think you're still here. So anyway, thank you all for your patience. And so what I'd like to do is kind of come back to maybe Marilyn Yim, if you would like to mention a few things that you and I have talked about the design charrettes that will be coming up, the opportunities for community input and that sort of thing, because this is not necessarily a super familiar project and initiative to many of the people in Queen Anne. So knowing those kinds of things are imminent will be helpful. So if you want to talk about that just a little bit, and then we'll just open it up for questions.
Sure. Thank you, Paula. Yeah, we came, myself, David Bergesser, and Ed Pothurst, who's also on the screen. We're working with ESTA on this project. So we're part of the project staff. We have other people who are also working with us in as well. King County Metro are our project partners. You're catching us at an interesting time. we are kind of like, right, I feel like this is like waiting for a baby to be born, right? That's kind of the way I feel right now. It's like this anticipation, like something big is going to happen, and like it's just like a matter of when. So like the hour right before this meeting started, our consultant agreement finally got signed internally within SDOT. So like that's the part of like, oh, you know, like a birth announcement. So we're pulling on a consultant team, a very, very skilled and knowledgeable consultant team to work with us on this. And so like we're just getting started with them to prep for what you were talking about, Paula. We're going to be in the spring, probably about like, you know, March, April-ish. We're anticipating doing a series of design charrettes. And we really want these to be community focused and community involved. It's so close to being executed, Ryan. Almost. Like they have to sign their part and then we can say who it is. So we've not given them notice to proceed, but like so soon. I'm telling you, it's like a birth announcement. Almost. You'll probably hear it next week. Anyway, we're preparing to work with them to develop the design charrettes. As Tom showed on one of the slides, the corridor is divided into 5 segments. We divided it that way, kind of based on the roadway characteristics, as well as different adjacent land uses, because the roadway does kind of change character as you go through. It's a very long stretch, 7.5 miles between the tunnel north portal and the city limits at 145th. So it's a very big chunk of corridor that we're looking at the whole thing holistically. ARC, I think they've kind of started up around the Licton Springs area, but we've been working with them on, you know, and trying to find community members who are interested in participating in this. We figure that Queen Anne residents probably know the most about your segment, and so we'd really like to hear from folks who really do know and use Aurora and have maybe a vision for what you'd like to see out there. So you'll be hearing more from us on that. We weren't ready to like quite yet to participate or to present on that, but we will soon. And so we're just here to answer questions right now, but we can come back later and do a more complete presentation. One thing I really wanted to emphasize though, is that our main focus on this is on safety. Safety. It is the top priority. I'm sure all of you have heard in the news practically, you know, pretty regularly, we hear about traffic collisions and fatalities, and it's just been going on and on Aurora. And so that's really what's underlining this with urgency, with our staff, with the public, with elected leaders. And so we really can't take our focus off of that. I think that's going to lead a lot of the, both the corridor vision overall and the spot improvements that we are recommending. So I just want to put that as like, that is our top value. I did hear a question earlier about other related issues that are along Aurora, and we are very aware there are lots of different things going on all at the same time, just because the corridor has been neglected so very long, I think. And so as we're getting ready to do a lot of public engagement, we are pulling in people from different city departments. Some of them are meeting with us regularly now. And certainly when we get community members together in a room with us, we expect that we're going to be hearing some of those things as well. We want to have a productive avenue for those issues to be discussed and taken care of. So we're preparing for that as well, to have those different departments at the table with us. So, you know, what we're doing is focused on traffic safety, right? And how the road, what happens on the roadway prism, but there are those other issues as well. And this is an opportunity, obviously the residents and community members are going to be meeting with city employees. And so this is an opportunity to channel those issues to the folks that can actually address them as well. I don't know if David wants to add anything, because I talked a lot.
Yeah, please do. Go ahead if you have something, David.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Marilyn. I'm David Bergesser. I'm with kind of the project development and the planning end of the study. And yeah, like Marilyn said, it's, you know, super exciting time for us. You know, we've run kind of an initial phase of engagement through last summer through the fall, where we've launched a survey, heard from folks on the court about just really high level priorities. And this next phase of engagement that we'll be reaching out to Queen Anne and to neighborhoods up and down the corridor is really going to be focused on how do we kind of translate those priorities, translate the data that we're seeing on the corridor into recommendations for what this actually looks like. How we, pulling that all together to look at, what's the future cross section of Aurora going to be? Where can we make spot improvements? What do those design aspects actually look like? And that's really what we're hoping to kind of get out of this process is a few alternatives that we can take back out to the community and hear thoughts and input from the residents and the people who are traveling on the corridor every day. But yeah, as you all know, Aurora is a very complex corridor with a lot of different uses right now, and some users that it's not serving very well. And so, it'd be a process of looking at all those, thinking about how we balance all the different interests out here. And so there's going to be a lot of folks who are kind of involved in those discussions as we move forward. But we're really excited to get into this process. And yeah, kind of expanding on Marilyn's point about safety, we definitely recognize that Aurora is, one of the city's highest priorities in terms of safety. Over the last several years, 17% of all traffic fatalities in the city have occurred on Aurora. And a lot of those are involving vulnerable users. So people who are walking along the corridor in particular. So we're really, we're undertaking this planning study to help us figure out, what is this future long-term vision for the corridor, but we're also not letting it slow us down in terms of making safety improvements. So we do have a smaller bucket of funding even before the $50 million to look at, more kind of smaller scale micro project style improvements that we can make to improve safety along the corridor. So we're currently analyzing those right now, working with our partners over at WashDOT. And seeing how we can move those forward rapidly to, look at, where have those collisions occurred? What can we do kind of near term to start to address those things? But it is a really challenging issue and, something we're continuing to look at. And anything, we implement now, we definitely want to be future proof as well. So, we're, definitely very excited to work with you all on this.
I wanted to add that I put in the chat the project website. Right at the very top of that, you scroll down past the banner photo. We recently uploaded the our planning survey findings report and outreach report that summarizes what we heard in a very large online survey that we conducted over the last summer and early fall. And then there's also contact links for our communications and outreach lead by phone, by email, and also to subscribe if you want to sign up for our email list. I want to make it really clear, we want to hear from you, but we have to get your information. So I want you all to know how to reach us. And so that's the best way. Krista is really handling a lot of that. So you can call her, email, and definitely sign up for our email updates as well.
Great, thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, Nicole was reading ahead, but that's okay. She's always ahead of the game. As Rick Hooper and I kind of got together with Tom and then ultimately with some folks from SDOT to get a better understanding of what the project is currently and where is it going and where are things in the development stage. It became obvious that what we need to do is have a representative group from Queen Anne, people who are interested not just in the transportation piece of it, but also the public safety, parks, and the alert pieces as well as time goes on, because those things will come into play at various stages. So we will want to be at least as knowledgeable as we can be so that we can respond, provide our input when it's asked. And also, I think working with Aurora Reimagined Coalition, it'll be really great to see what's happening in some of the other segments of the project, because there may be a really great idea being implemented in a segment that we haven't thought of. So there's no pride of authorship here, and we appreciate all the work that has already been done, and we're hoping to take advantage of springboarding off of that for the benefit of our Queen Anne community. So who else has questions? Because we could, I'm sure there are lots of things that people are wondering about, and we may need to revisit this soon. I think as soon as SDOT's ready to move forward and tell us about their new child, we'll be better positioned to, to get down to the details. So if there's anything at all, and if not, I want to thank all of you. Tom, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it very much, and I'm sure you'll hear from some folks. And Marilyn, David, Ed, who am I missing that's on here? I can't see everybody's names. Anyway, thank you so much for coming this evening too. We very much appreciate your time, and you'll be hearing more from us. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for making time. And I'm sure we'll be definitely speaking more
Absolutely.
in the future.
Thank you.
Right.
All right. So, and you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of our meeting if you'd like to. So, okay. So I think with that, we will very quickly do our general business, which is approval of the minutes. So Beth is not here. I'm just going to really quickly ask if there are any abstentions from the approval of the minutes from January. Abstentions, none. Any corrections or modifications? No. And so I assume that the minutes then are approved, and we'll just document. So, okay. And Ben Bennett, do you want to tell us about the state of our financial well-being?
Sure. As of December to January, our general account is currently at $1,796.97, and the appeals account is $1,426.45.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am in the process of looking at shifting our account to another institution that will have a free account for us, because we just don't have enough money to pay fees every month. So that's a work in progress. And I think now we will go to the committee reports. So Don, do you have any update on parks? And we'll start with you.
No, actually, basically Andrew updated us, and Sharon asked a great question. It was so she got the same answer as I expected, of course. And Paula, you actually brought up yesterday on the transportation committee in talking with ARC, which is the Associated Rec Council that manages all the people who come that are not park employees that come to work in the community centers, that they're having trouble finding people to come in and work at the community centers. So no surprise, probably if they, like everybody else, if they paid them more, if they could make more money, and they might be more willing to work. So that's kind of it right now. Smith Cove Park is still on hiatus. I haven't been able to get word, heard, or I'm in touch with them, but I haven't heard anything about whether they're progressing. So that's it.
Great, thank you. Jasmine, do you want to provide any update on transportation really quickly? And
Sure, yeah, we had a meeting last night just to start talking about where things are, where things have been, and what we're looking forward to over the next year. Really looking forward to seeing some more pedestrian safety and seeing what happens with the Thomas Street project that's been on the back burner for a while, but there's, I know, some renewed attention after the police murder of Miss Kandula, Janavi Kandula recently. So looking into that into the new year. And then we adjusted our cadence. So our next meeting will be March 28th, a Tuesday. And so we'll be meeting every other month, like on the Tuesday at the end of the month instead of the third Thursday. So those are the updates.
great, thank you. And Mark Oster was on the meeting, but I don't see him now. So I was curious if you have heard anything, Jasmine, about Qacc Plaza. I haven't heard a thing
I
about.
have not either. I can reach out.
Sure. Well, let's see what's happening. If anything, it could be another thing that's just on the list. Denny, do you want to
Sure.
work?
First off, I would like to thank Paula and Nicole for jumping in at the last minute. I was about 15 minutes before my alert call, January 16th. I had a medical emergency, not me, but somebody else. It all turned out well, so I'll let you know that. But they jumped in at the last minute and took this meeting over like they had planned it all week. So I thank them very much for that. I apologize again, but I can't always control when things are going to happen. And is what I'd like to do is I ask one question for, were the approval of the meeting minutes for 9/19 during that meeting approved?
I think I
Nicole, do you know?
forgot.
Pardon?
I think I forgot.
That's okay. No big deal. I just want to know where I am. And I mean, you guys were like, I appreciate anything you did. So,
Yeah.
do you want to run over quickly what?
Yeah.
went on? Or I've got the notes right here, but I
can
think
do
it'd be better if you did.
Yeah, no problem. A couple of quick
Okay.
highlights. I think most of interest to folks here, the 21 Boston project, so the Safeway project. Maria gave a great update. It's gonna appear that a ton of progress is being made in the next few months. So they're gonna be pouring the concrete, they're gonna be putting up the framing. Apparently the framing's being kind of put together off-site and then brought in and kind of assembled. So it's gonna appear to go up very quickly. And then, so the actual structure will be built fairly quickly, like by the summer, and then it'll just be, you know, the time to get all of the other stuff built. But I've been super impressed with how quickly they've moved. So that was a great update. The Seattle storm facility also gave an update there, and you know, that's moving forward. Just a super cool facility. My kind of big interest, like sort of just always question I ask is the light rail is a big area of kind of outstanding question. You know, it's currently planned to go straight through it. So they're going to build it, and then they're going to see kind of what the alternatives for the light rail path are, which are, you know, should be interesting, but it's a super cool facility. So great that that's moving forward. And then the permanent supportive housing project on 15th. So the gentleman who runs that kind of gave a presentation. And so they're supposed to follow up with just some design plans that to be able to kind of for us to take a look, and if anyone on Lark, you know, for us to provide any feedback that we might have. But I believe those are the kind of three big things that were covered.
And just to assuage some of your fears, the latest options from ST3 do not cause any problems for the storm facility. So I think they too were quite taken by the fact that that facility was going to be there and that the community did not want it to be torn down.
Yeah, from like a budget perspective. Okay, so what's the city going to pay him $300 million? That's stupid.
And no, that was not happening. So anyway, so yeah, we were happy to learn that at the last couple of meetings on ST3. So Morgan Littlefield, you have a quick question.
Well, no, I actually just wanted to share, you probably saw it in the Uptown newsletter, but they have a community meeting next Thursday regarding Sound Transit. So Sound Transit will be presenting, and it's more focused on the Uptown neighborhood, but they'll show the route and be answering questions. So it's a public meeting and anyone can join. So I just wanted to share that since Sound Transit was brought up.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you. Yeah, very much.
Paula?
Yeah, go ahead, Danny. I
I've
did
got one more thing I just want to
go right
mention.
ahead.
Sorry. Next Lurk meeting will be on February 20th at 7:30. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you guys again for bailing me out.
Of course, no problem at all. Anytime. Tyler Cron. Oh, I'm sorry, Don, you had your hand.
Oh, yeah, just, I was going to add that not only is the storm facility there, but there's also a proposed city light substation that's going right there. And just to follow up on Nicole and kind of what you were saying on the way that the Safeway is going up, it's very common now in commercial that the walls are framed in a factory setting, and electrical and plumbing are installed. And so it just kind of connects, and then they connect it up. It's pretty incredible what they're doing.
It'll be interesting to see them bring them up the hill. It was like when they were digging out that hole and had to bring all the dirt down the hill, and it was like just the constant, like, you know, truck after truck of 7,000 trucks of dirt. So it's interesting.
Yeah, the panels will be pretty good size, so the panelized construction will be interesting to watch. So that'll go quickly. Okay. Okay, so Tyler, where are you? There you are. Sorry, I couldn't see you on my screen. I apologize. So before Tyler talks, I just wanted to let everybody know that she is officially now installed as the Public Safety Committee Chair. So congratulations to Tyler, and I'll let you talk about public safety.
Perfect. Thank you, Paula. Having Councilmember Lewis gave us a good start and recap to some of the substantive issues, but we had a great kickoff meeting that was very well attended on the 24th. It was an opportunity to brainstorm priorities, to acknowledge and thank Bob for his work carrying the committee over so many years, to get some know-how from him about what to do. But some of the kind of key takeaways and highlights are a continued focus on crime and safety, and really the role that we will play in partnering and supporting the work that Paula's leading to bring together local businesses with elected officials around this crime and safety question. That, I believe, is a Zoom meeting on February 28th, and we're involved in some of the outreach to our local businesses and helping some of the community partners who are taking the lead on that, so that we're opening up more of a conversation and getting more of our small local businesses hopefully involved in the council. Another arm of the committee and a piece of work that we have another event coming up around is this emergency preparedness element and arm. And Bill Fay is, I believe, organizing a emergency preparedness conversation with seismic retrofitting on February 21st by Zoom, and those details will go out separately as well. So we kind of have a jam-packed February with events. And then one of the ongoing pieces of work as well will be this kind of fire and response, but an arm that I'm seeking to bring into the public safety piece is a public health and community well-being element. And I'm really excited that Councilmember Lewis has offered an opportunity for us to help convene a town hall that would be about civic education and engagement around this ballot initiative, so we can better understand how we're meeting or failing to meet people in crisis. And this opportunity for us as voters to understand what will be on the ballot in April around supporting a network of crisis care centers. So that's a piece of work that is just in its very nascent stages of planning. And again, folks on the Public Safety Committee and the broader council are really welcome to reach out to me at any time to help shape that. I think our hope is that this will be an in-person forum, that we will bring some other community partners on board and potentially hold it at KEXP in Uptown. So it would be a different format than the Zoom, and again, late March or early April, as Councilmember Lewis said. A few of the other pieces that are a little bit new and a little bit different is one, trying to do outreach and engagement with our local schools, and Caroline and I are working on that. I have an email that I have promised now for a week and then got a sick kid, so the email has stalled, to do outreach to our schools to figure out if our local schools, private and public, want to hear from us and want to be a part of getting alerts from our block captain network, so that we can play a kind of cross-pollinating role in some of the other initiatives around our neighborhood, around safety. There have been, Bob Kettle flagged an issue that was happening around one of the private schools of someone of concern in the school vicinity. There have been issues of concern that have happened around some of our public schools as well. So trying to create a more rapid response email list of making sure we're in touch with and connecting the right folks, and opening up again more of that conversation with our local public schools. The last, and private schools, the last piece that was raised in our open brainstorming around topics and conversations and concerns was a question of an area of concern around SPU and a return of RVs, and what has happened in the past to partner around these types of scenarios. And Bob was sharing his expertise on that. And that is a piece that was kind of put a pin on to think about how, again, cross-pollinating with other community networks such as the Block Captain Network and Block Captain Watch. And I'm probably getting the name totally wrong, Paula, I apologize. But how we can be partners in some of these issues of kind of safety and what is happening across our neighborhood on that level as well. So our first quarter will be kind of chock full of events, meetings, and I will liaise with Paula to hear what her thoughts are about when we need to put another general meeting in, given that we have kind of an event heavy next 6 weeks or so. So thank you all so much. And Marcus, who I don't believe is in tonight's meeting, is going to be partnering around much more of the kind of crime and safety portfolio, and also being a liaison with some of our local businesses, but it looks like he wasn't able to join tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Let's see, anything else? I'm just looking at the list here really quickly. Just to add a couple of things, and Bill Fay had texted and said he unfortunately had a conflict that he hadn't realized, so he couldn't be here. So just very quickly, I do want to mention on February 21st at 7 p.m., there is Sound Seismic offered to do a seismic retrofitting little seminar, and they're going to do it. It's not an advertisement for them. It's just a factual thing. But they'll be doing that, and Bill's hosting. And then on February 28th at 7:30, we are organizing in conjunction with some of the businesses that were hit so hard in the last quarter, especially with break-ins and that sort of thing up here, a meeting with a representative from the mayor's office, SPD, city council, let's see, I can't remember who else, but anyway, a number of public officials to allow those businesses to talk about what they've experienced, hear from public officials, and also to offer some thoughts from the businesses about what they would like to see or ideas they may have about solutions that could be implemented quickly. But anyway, that'll be an important meeting for them to be heard by the leaders in the city, and hopefully to get some constructive feedback and some action items. So both of those meetings will be in the newsletter, and then separately they'll have a specific meeting announcement go out. And I will be looking for some volunteers to help distribute like paper flyers to the business community, because we know we just can't reach everybody by email and stuff, because we don't have those contact pieces. Caroline, did you have your hand up about that, or?
I think you answered. I was going to ask, is there a link you can share at some point for the retrofit
Yes.
meeting? Because I want to pass it on to my neighbors.
Yeah, both of those will be, and the newsletter should actually go out within the next couple of days. So that'll be in there, and then separate announcements will go out, because those are coming up pretty quickly, and I want people to have a lot of time to get them on their calendars. So with that, I have one other thing I'm going to say. I should take it back. A couple of other things. That we had a sad incident this week. So I don't know, those of you who may remember that a year and a half ago, I don't know, it seems like it's been forever, when we had a big effort led by We Heart Seattle and the community volunteers to clean up McLean Park and the East Queen Anne Greenbelt. And that has been a huge success. We're so proud of that. We have a standing committee now, the Friends of McLean Park in the Greenbelt, we go twice a month to do litter picks, trash pickups, activation walks, whatever we need to do to keep that area pristine. One of the volunteers who worked with us during the big cleanup and then had been taking it on kind of as a personal stewardship item with us, Gregor Talbot, who was homeless himself, but just absolutely dedicated to that project and helping us in the community, passed away. He had kind of fallen off the radar and unfortunately was found deceased just recently. And so he'll be very sorely missed. He was a very kind soul and a great asset to us. So that's all I can say about that. Anyway, Morgan mentioned the ST3 meeting that's happening, and that will also be in the newsletter. It's February 9th from 5 to 7. There will be a link to sign up for that. And it is primarily about the Uptown Station, but that'll be important to us. And let's see. I'll also include a link to to the Uptown Alliance newsletter because there's a lot of stuff in that this month. Morgan is still here. So kudos to Climate Pledge Arena because they have negotiated free public transit to events at Climate Pledge that are publicly ticketed. So that's a huge bonus for people wanting to attend some of those events at Climate Pledge. That's been a very successful thing for them because Qacc ticket holders get free transit. And now it's expanded to include more people. So use transit, go to Climate Pledge. They also are holding a hiring fest on February 7th from 4 to 5:30. So if you or anyone you know is looking for an opportunity to work at Climate Pledge, there will be a link to find out where to go and how to connect with that. So, okay, anything else that anyone would like to bring up? Caroline.
You know, listening to the Aurora project, it would really be great to walk along the part of Aurora because when you drive, you can't go slowly enough to really look and see. So
Right.
I don't know if anybody else would ever be interested in doing that for the section that pertains to Queen Anne, but it would be helpful to me to be able to do that.
And I'd be happy to arrange a time when anybody wants to go. It is very interesting, and because the Greenbelt abuts Aurora and we clean up along Aurora, it's actually very interesting how impassable the sidewalks are there in some areas. And in fact, Aurora Coalition had brought attention to it last summer. It got cleaned up. And then last weekend when we were working down there, it was just horrible. Again, nobody in a wheelchair could get up and down it. There's actually a tree that's fallen partially over the sidewalk. There's like leaves and things like that. Mud that has covered up all of the concrete that's there. So yeah, if anybody's interested, just email me and we'll get a mutually agreeable time and we can decide where to meet and how to get there. So. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate everybody's time this evening. And you will get something specifically about, being involved in the Aurora Avenue project for the Queen Anne segment. So if any element of that's of interest, it'll it's not going to be like a huge amount of work, but just kind of staying up to date on what's happening and then also helping make sure that we're getting community input and involvement. So I'd love to have help from a lot of people on that and people from the community. We'll do a community outreach on that project. So thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Paula. Good night.
Good night.